Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. On October 7th, upon having the very first reports of an incursion by Hamas against Israeli forces, we initially couldn't but feel a sense of exhilaration, excitement. Finally, we'd say, a seemingly well-planned and accordant operation against the criminal, rogue state of Israel. A solid thrust at their supposed invisibility, untouchableness, as they claimed, both from the aspect of their security and from the aspect of their constant evasion from facing the consequences of their crimes against the Palestinian people. We'd say this despite our stark contrast with Hamas on every front you can possibly imagine. Ideologically, morally, ethically, theologically, the only mutuality really that can be between us would be solely the refusal except to recognize Israel as an occupying, rogue, illegitimate state. Other than that, there can never be something that ties us with them. We can never be allies in any sense. Rather, we are foes, for they have shed from our blood also, Shi'as of Al-Habib. Yet, that never impeded our initial refreshment at a common factor, which is resistance against the state of Israel. But as we earnestly followed the coverage on various news agencies, endeavoring to get the story right, away from the lies spewed by both pro-Israeli and pro-Palestinian media, we were overtaken by shock. And our initial feelings of excitement, exhilaration, and refreshment were replaced with those of immense anger and disgust. Atrocities committed, innocents killed, elderly kidnapped, women paraded, children and infants snatched, mass indiscriminate shootings, families attacked and houses burnt, all whilst they chant Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Free from you is that chant, and free from you are the true Muslims. For you have violated the sanctity of Islam with your abhorrent actions in its name. And you have once again added fuel to the fire ignited against Islam and the Muslims. Whilst the world was still in shock, trying to process what had happened, our thoughts were seized elsewhere. And what we dreaded most happened.
الإصابات اللي أجت علينا بعد الانفجار الكبير اللي هز كل معسكر جماليا، مئات الجرحى ومئات الشهداء في بيوت آمنين، في بيوت تم قصفهم جميعا، في بيوت آمنين، أطفال كلهم شهداء، أطفال وشيوخ ونساء.
هذا هو المشهد. يا الله يا الله، هذا هو المشهد. يا الله يا الله، فقد أهلها الآن صديق حمدي أبو القمصان حجازي. يا الله يا الله يا الله، من لنا يا الله. هذا هو المشهد.
ايش اللي صار يا حاج؟ ايش اللي صار؟ ابني يا اخوي،
ابني تشوفه هذا الخط وشفت فيه حبيت سيئة والله كنت حبيت سيئة.
حرام يا عم، قول لهم حرام، وين بدنا نروح، وين بدنا نيجي؟ قول لهم حرام، صار الموت هين صار الموت.
مالنا غيرك يا رب،
يا رب قتلوا أطفالنا يا رب، والله يا رب ما حذرونا. يا رب عليك بحكام العرب يا رب، والله ما حذرونا يا رب. راح أطفالنا قاعدين مأمنين يا رب تحت سماكة.
Innocent Palestinian civilians paying the heavy price for Hamas's barbarity. Israel lost whatever little restraint it had, mass murdering innocent lives in Gaza at an unprecedented scale, cutting off food, electricity and water to over 2.2 or 2.3 million lives in Gaza, men, women and children, which in itself is a violation to international humanitarian law. Dropping over 11,000 bombs. Let that number sink in for a second. 11,000 bombs in a period of 3 weeks, which is unheard of, even in the Russian-Ukraine war.
Okay, well, President Biden has accused the Russian government of genocide for its actions in Ukraine, where in 2 years it has killed as many civilians as Israel has killed in 1 month in the Gaza Strip. So how do you account for that disparity where you're assisting one country and accusing the other of genocide when the country you're assisting has systematically killed so many more people in 1 month?
Those circumstances are totally and completely not the same, and to make a comparison like that, candidly, is incredibly inappropriate. We have been, please don't interrupt me.
Plainly violating international law, international humanitarian law, international human rights law, the Geneva Conventions, in open daylight, with complete brazenness and disregard, massacring women and children, carpet bombing indiscriminately, safe zones, UN sanctuaries, schools, densely populated areas, which Gaza itself is densely populated, if not the most densely populated city in the world. Bombing refugee camps and hospitals. Reports say that out of 35 hospitals in Gaza, 13 are operating. And that is prior to the bombing of al-Shifa, Al-Quds and the Indonesian hospital. As I record this video on the 3rd of November, 27 days after the events on October 7th. Thus far, the number of innocent Palestinian casualties has surpassed 10,000, with around 4,000 of them being children. And that is not counting the wounded or missing under the rubbles. With that repackaged for you, let me now take an active voice. It is as if I hear Israel's bloodthirsty PM, Benjamin Netanyahu, say to his war council, "They killed from us 1,400, we will kill from them 100 times that number." And you practically heard it, right from the horse's mouth when referencing Samuel 15 in the Bible. "You must remember the Amalek," he said.
You must remember what Amalek has done to you, says our Holy Bible, and we do remember and we are fighting.
Now go and attack the Amalek and totally destroy all that belongs to them. Do not spare them, but put to death men and women, children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys. So this is precisely what the Israeli government is intent on doing. An extermination of the Arab race from their promised land. This here is potentially an unequivocal genocidal statement. What do international humanitarian laws mean if they can be breached so brazenly, so clearly, so apparently, in open daylight, without any immediate repercussions from those who took upon themselves the obligation to uphold international humanitarian law, actionless, only providing lip service?
I'm deeply concerned about clear violations of international humanitarian law that we are witnessing. Let me be clear. No party to an armed conflict is above international humanitarian law.
Grave breaches have been committed, yet the UN stands idly by whilst they and the world are witnesses to a genocide unfolding.
Ladies and gentlemen of the press, Gaza is becoming a graveyard for children. Hundreds of girls and boys are reportedly being killed or injured every day.
Gaza is truly turning into a mass graveyard. Entire families are being killed whilst no action against Israel is taken. Not even sanctions. Rather the contrary. Military aid in billions are being poured on the Israeli government, supporting their genocide. Has the UN truly outlived its purpose? Has it truly become so powerless to the extent of being a witness to a clear genocide unfolding? Or at least clear, grave breaches of international law, international humanitarian law, customary international law, the Geneva Conventions, and every possible moral standard upheld internationally. It is not even arguable that there is excessive loss of life, extensive destruction, and indiscriminate attacks being launched by the Israeli forces. Putting aside proportionality, putting aside depriving a whole population, 2.2 million in number, of life essentials such as water, electricity, and food. Putting aside the apartheid, putting aside the racial discrimination, putting aside the hospital bombings, etc. Why is the UN not taking action? It is stated on the International Committee of the Red Cross website, if the rules of war are broken, there are consequences. War crimes are documented and investigated by states and international courts. Individuals can be prosecuted for their war crimes. What are the consequences? They include diplomatic condemnation, economic sanctions, as in the case with the Russian-Ukraine war, international criminal prosecutions for individuals who are responsible for war crimes, crimes against humanity. They'd be arrested and brought before an international criminal court and judged for their actions. And that is relevant to our case. Arms embargo, which is a restriction, a set of sanctions on the weaponry of a law-violating state. But in our case, it's the contrary. As Israel are making grave breaches to international law, we have foolish, senile old Biden pledging $14.3 billion worth of military aid, supporting their genocide against the Palestinian people. Cutting to the chase, number 5, peacekeeping missions or military intervention, where the international community deploys a powerful peacekeeping force or authorizing military intervention to protect civilians and restore peace and order in a time of conflict and turmoil. And this precisely is what needs to take place. However, before expanding on that front, I would like to make our stance clear for all Muslim, Jewish, Christian, and all who are watching me now. We, the Rafida, Shia Muslims, reject and denounce both Israel and Hamas. Every individual, especially Muslims, who celebrated the events of October 7th after the facts were proven, undoubtedly should be ashamed of themselves. Do not be naive and foolish to believe that Hamas has brought victory to the Palestinian cause. Believe you me, you will be held accountable before Allah the Exalted on the day of resurrection for rejoicing at the blood of the innocent. Our war is not with civilians. Our war is not with the Jewish people. Our stance is this, is that we are for resistance against the state of Israel. We are for resistance to retain back our lands that were seized and occupied and taken away from us. Our stance is clear. Not for Israel and not for Hamas. We are with the Palestinian people. We are with the oppressed, wherever they are, whoever they are. As taught by the commander of the faithfuls, Ali ibn Abi Talib, blessings be upon him, where he stated, كونا للظالم خصما وللمظلوم عونا. Be to the oppressor a foe, and be to the oppressed a supporter. This is what Islam teaches me, to stand with the oppressed, whoever they are, Christian, Jewish, Hindu, Buddhist. So long as they are oppressed, we shall stand with them, we shall support them. And Islam teaches me that I condemn the oppressor, whoever they are, Muslim or not, ascribing to themselves the Muslim title or not. And here I specifically address the non-Muslim who is watching me now. in all this pandemonium and chaos and fast-paced events that are taking place, I urge you to level your thinking. You must differentiate between the true religion of Islam and those who ascribe themselves to it unworthily. The true religion and teachings of Islam and terrorist organizations such as Hamas or other political parties that are seeking merely to further their political power by means of force. The actions of Hamas have no relation whatsoever to the true religion of Islam. Rather, they done what they done for their political agenda. Hence why they took hostages in their hundreds. Hence why they took the elderly and the children and the women to use them as leverage for their demands. And as we've read in the news, they wanted to use the hostages to apply pressure on the Israeli government to release their members and militants that are in Israeli custody. And upon Hamas militants being captured and interrogated by the Israelis, they were asked, "Did you do what you had done because of the teachings of Islam?" They responded,
وهذا هيك هذا في القرآن هيك بيقول الإسلام؟
حسب الدين الإسلامي. مش أنت إسلامي؟ الدين الإسلامي بيقول لك هيك تعال اقتل. لا خليني أفهم. هذه التصرفات أنت ما بتشوفها يعني مش زي داعش هيك قتل المدنيين عشوائيا؟ صحيح؟
الدين منع عن يعني النبي قال لا تقتلوا امرأة لا تقتلوا طفلا لا تعقروا امرأة لا زي فاهم علي؟ الدين ما بحث على التشويه والتنكيل
الدين الإسلامي يقبل هيك؟ أبدا قلت لك أنا لا تقطع الشجرة.
And there you have it. In Islam, there are rules, ethics, morals, laws that must be adhered to in warfare. I shall be presenting before you some of these laws, and I want you to make the distinction between the true Islamic teachings and the actions of Hamas. This is for you to fathom the complete contrast between the Islamic teachings in warfare and the actions of a terrorist organization that are seeking to further their political agenda. Irrespective of whether or not some of these agendas may commensurate or correspond with the wider Muslim population, such as seeking to liberate Palestine from Israeli occupation. Number one, not to kill or harm civilians. Number two, not to kill the elderly. Number three, not to kill women. Number four, not to kill children. Number five, not to kill a carer. And this is despite them being combatants. From the teachings of Islam, from the rules of warfare in Islam, that if a Muslim soldier was to see an enemy soldier that he knows to be a carer and that his family depends solely on him for their life essentials, the Muslim soldier, bound by that rule, should take all the necessary precautions to avoid killing him, so that he may continue to care for his family. These are the teachings of Islam that teaches you to distinguish between a combatant carer and a regular combatant. As for Hamas, undistinguishing between a combatant and a non-combatant, do you expect them to distinguish between a combatant carer and a non-carer? This is for you to recognize how far they are from the teachings of Islam. Every innocent woman that was killed, every innocent man that was killed, every innocent elderly that was killed by Hamas would be regarded as grave breaches of the Islamic laws in warfare. Number six, do not kill the ailed or bedridden. Do not kill a messenger. Do not kill a religious person. And in Islamic texts, they would specifically mention monks. Number nine, not to kill doctors or physicians. And once again, I emphasize that this is despite them being combatants. Combat medics, the Muslim soldiers, binded by that rule, must take all the necessary precautions to avoid killing that doctor, but rather disarming them and capturing them so that they may continue to save lives in future. Their life is respected. Their skill is respected. Which takes us to the 10th rule, which states, do not kill a skillful person, such as an engineer or a carpenter, a goldsmith or a farmer. Islam teaches by that rule that if a combatant possesses a particular skill, expertise or talent that is within the realms of an engineer, a carpenter, a goldsmith, a farmer, and skills alike would be a factor to distinguish between them and other combatants. Islam would apply on that soldier to take the necessary precautions to avoid killing them. Again, you make the comparison. Rather, let me pose to you another question. Forget Hamas. Wherever you are watching me now, from wherever country around the world, do your army, from wherever you are from, have such a rule? Would they distinguish between a regular combatant and a combatant that has a particular skill that could be of use and great benefit to people? Do your armies distinguish between a combatant who is a carer from a combatant that is not? Notice the degree and to what extent the laws of Islam endeavors to save lives. Number 11, do not kill a blind person. Number 12, do not kill one with a psychotic disorder. Again, distinguishing from the regular combatant and the combatant who has psychological difficulties. Number 13, do not kill the crippled or the immobilized. Do not kill the combatant who surrenders and drops their arms. Number 15, do not torture prisoners of war. Number 16, do not mutilate or desecrate a corpse. And this is amongst the most emphasized rules taught by the Messenger Muhammad, blessings be upon him and his family. He would say, do not mutilate even a mordacious dog. And the videos which you saw, as did I, from Hamas doing such actions is not at all from the teachings of Prophet Muhammad, blessings be upon him and his family, nor from the teachings of Islam, and it's in no way has any relation to us Shi'a Muslims. Rather, I am certain that the Prophet Muhammad, blessings be upon him and his family, who is described in the Quran as the mercy to mankind. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. We have not sent you, O Muhammad, except as a mercy to mankind. He, blessings be upon him and his family, Muhammad, is pained over the actions of Hamas and the loss of innocent lives even more than the bereaved in the Jewish community. Our Prophet's blessings be upon him is merciful. Our Prophet, blessings be upon him and his family, in the Battle of Badr, which took place in 624 CE and resulted in a huge Muslim victory, where they sent the Quraysh army fleeing back to Mecca and took captive of a large number of their soldiers, whilst everyone was rejoicing, elated, exhilarated, jumping in joy and jubilation. Our Prophet, blessings be upon him, was crying, was in tears, crying over the very people who set out to fight him and kill him, crying over the very people who for 13 long years persecuted him and his followers with a persecution unlike any other known in the Arabic Peninsula. This is our Prophet, the mercy to mankind. And there's something that I've kept from you. Yes, I admit, there is something that I've kept from you which I've left up until this part in this video. Surely Hamas and ISIS and Boko Haram and Al-Qaeda and Taliban and their likes from terrorist organizations, surely they take some kind of teachings that justify their actions. Surely they must have a legislative source in which they can take the justification to do what they do. Now the question is, what is that legislation and from who do they take it from? Remaining in the Battle of Badr in 624 CE, upon the Muslim army securing a victory upon the Quraysh army and sending them fleeing back where they came from. And as the army were gathering the spoils of war, rejoicing and jubilating in complete elation, counting their spoils of war and counting the captives, two men by the name of Abu Bakr and Umar went to the Prophet of Allah, blessings be upon him and his family. And upon seeing the Prophet crying over the captives, the latter, Umar, would be urging him to kill them and put them all by the sword, shedding their blood so that it may teach them a lesson, and that their killing would be means to strike terror into the hearts of the disbelievers, as he would say. Of course, the Prophet of Allah, Muhammad, blessings be upon him and his family, rejected such proposition and kept all the captives alive, releasing them one by one, with many of them seeing the kindness of the Messenger of Allah and the teachings and characteristics of Islam. They could not but adopt the Islamic faith. If you have a question asking yourself, from where do Hamas, ISIS, Boko Haram, the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and all these terrorist organizations, where do they take their legitimacy from? Where do they take their teachings from? Who are their ideological forefathers? They'd be these two, Abu Bakr and Umar. Mass murder, burning alive, mutilations, killing of the innocent, terrorism as a whole stems from these two. Remember their names? Abu Bakr and Umar, where after the Prophet's demise, blessings be upon him and his family, after his martyrdom and assassination, which they and their two daughters, Aisha and Hafsa, conspired to do, they became rulers and legislated the terrorism that you see today, committed by Hamas and organizations alike. And for more on that, to understand the ideological roots of terrorism within the Islamic framework, watch the Lady of Heaven film. For there you discover not only the ideological roots of terrorism, not only that the Prophet, blessings be upon him and his family, was assassinated by two of his treacherous companions and by his own wife, Aisha, but you discover that the first victim of terrorism was the Prophet's own daughter, Fatima, the Lady of Heaven, blessings be upon her.
You're going to let a woman tell us what to do? We will burn her out!
Yes, this is the fact that no one has told you about. And specifically here, I am addressing the non-Muslims who are watching me now. Lady Fatima, the daughter of Prophet Muhammad, sacrificed her blood to safeguard the message of her father from being hijacked and corrupted by the founding fathers of quote-unquote Islamic terrorism, Abu Bakr and Umar. Number 17, do not breach treaties. Number 18, do not be treacherous. And moving over to environmental laws, the first, do not cut off water. Water is an essential right in Islam. We would not cut it off even at our worst enemy. And in the Battle of Siffin, occurring in 657 CE, where the commander of the faithfuls, Ali ibn Abi Talib, blessings be upon him, the rightful chosen successor of the Prophet Muhammad, blessings be upon him and his family, was engaged in war with Muawiyah, the ruler of the Levant, he would not deprive him of water in spite of the fact that Muawiyah had cut off water from him. and his army. The very soldiers of Imam Ali, blessings be upon him, would go to him and say, Imam, let us deprive them of water as they did to us. We had to fight to take possession of water. Why hand it to them so easily? Let us deprive them in the same way they deprived us. Yet the Imam, blessings be upon him, would refuse except to say, water is the right to every being. These are the teachings of Islam. How unfortunate is that our enemies would not treat us in the same way. As the bloodthirsty Israeli security minister, Yoav Gallant, would say,
אין חשמל, אין מזון, אין מים, אין דלק. הכל סגור. אנחנו נלחמים בחיות אדם ואנחנו נוהגים בהתאם.
Human animals. Notice the dehumanization, cutting off life essentials for over 2.3 million people in Gaza. Innocent men, women and children, including animals, who have no relation to Hamas, for God's sake.
هذه بسبب القرارات الخاطئة لقادتنا اللي جابوا لنا المصايب.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أذن للذين يقاتلون بأنهم ظلموا وإن الله على نصرهم لقدير.
عليك يا حماس، أشكيك إلى الله يا حماس. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل.
شو بتقول لنا المقاومة؟ هم بيقولوا انكم مقاومين، يعني انتم اطفال وبقتلوكم بيقولوا قدام العالم انكم مقاومين، شو بتقول لنا المقاومة الفلسطينية؟
يعني هم حطوا العرب بخطر، يعني هم جت تحت الانفاق واحنا الضحايا اللي بتروح ناس مدنيين.
Number 2, do not cut off food. Number 3, do not cut off trees. 4, do not set fires. 5, do not poison or pollute water as means against the enemy. 6, do not poison or contaminate food. And 7, do not set floods. Amongst many other rules, ethics, morals, and laws that can be found in the Islamic legislative books. By now you have made the comparison. You have applied the reflection of these rules upon Hamas's actions, knowing with full certainty that they have breached the very laws of Islam, the very ethics of Islam, morals of Islam. Not only that, but they are belonging to the false, phony and hijacked Islam of Abu Bakr and Umar, not the Islam of the Prophet Muhammad and his purified progeny. Having said that, we conclude this segment of this video to say, had Hamas adhered to the morals, ethics, laws and rules of Islam, they would have won the hearts and minds of the people, bringing to our cause in liberating the land of Palestine from the Israeli occupation many people around the globe. If only had they done so. On Saturday, the 7th of October, as nightfall came by, His Eminence Sheikh Al-Habib, in his weekly Friday and Saturday research sittings, commented on the events of the day the following.
يعني أنت صاحب قضية عادلة، أنت صحيح، أنت فلسطيني، أنت مظلوم، الشعب الفلسطيني مظلوم، محتل، مقدساته منتهكة، كل ذلك صحيح. طيب ليش ترتكب أفعال تخلي العالم يصيرون ضدك بدلا من أن يتعاطفوا معك؟ ما كان أحلاها أنه أنت تأسر هؤلاء الجنود وتلك المجندات، أول المدنيين تجنبهم، تحفظهم، ما تمسهم أبدا، ما تمسهم أبدا. صحيح هم آثمون، بس على الأقل مو حامل سلاح. النبي الأعظم في وصاياه بالمناسبة في الحروب، من ألقى سلاحه فهو آمن. خلص كان يوصي المسلمين، إذا شفتوا واحد مشرك يقاتلنا ألقى سلاحه آمن، خلص أمنوه، تركوه. كان هذا النداء، مع أنه شوف كان حامل سلاح، فشلون إذا يكون ببيته مع أطفاله؟ إذا دخلتم عليه بالعكس قدموا له وردة، تكسبون قلوب العالم، تخلون حتى هؤلاء الإسرائيليين يضغطون على حكومتهم أنه ما شفنا من هؤلاء إلا الخير من الفلسطينيين، ليش إحنا محتلينهم؟ ليش ما ننسحب؟ ليش ما نريحهم؟ تكسب، هنا يكون الانتصار. فالمدنيين ما لك علاقة بهم، كل من لا يحمل سلاح ما لك علاقة به. من يقاتلك تقاتله، صحيح اللي حامل سلاح، فإذا وقع أسيرا تتعامل معه بأخلاقيات الإسلام وقوانين الإسلام. حقوق الأسير في الإسلام موجودة، في الفقه الإسلامي موجود، كل ذلك موجود ومؤصل. ما تعذبه، تحفظ له حقوقه، تجيبه، تظهر هاي الصورة البراقة أمام الناس، أمام العالم، أنه إحنا شوفوا رغم هذا الاضطهاد، رغم أنه نحن شعب محتل من 60-70 سنة مع ذلك لما وقع جنود العدو أسرى بين أيدينا حفظنا كرامتهم الإنسانية وحقوقهم الإنسانية.
Indeed, precisely. If Hamas had a sense of prudence, they would have been able to make the international public opinion side with them, fighting combatants only upon the aforementioned rules that we just presented before you, and treating innocent civilians, men, women, and children with the utmost respect and kindness. Yes, handing them a flower, telling them that you are safe, no harm would touch you, for we are at war with the Israeli occupying government, not you. We are resisting for the lands that they seized from us unjustly. We are resisting for the men, women, and children who were massacred. We are resisting for the oppressed that they have oppressed. We are resisting for the lives that were lost. We are resisting for justice. Be assured that no harm would touch you, for you and your families are safe. If that message was delivered globally, if there was a video of a Hamas fighter saying the aforementioned, it would have made the international public opinion side with the Palestinian cause, knowingly that Israel would have perhaps had the very same response that it has now, only with less intensivity, perhaps. Otherwise, they would have still went on their rage and their murder campaign, for Hamas has destroyed and destructed their image that they strived so hardly to craft of invisibility, untouchableness, the strongest and most powerful force in the region. And even if they had claimed that citizens were killed, innocents were killed, children were in the oven, as one guy said, these videos would have disproved it, except that that was not the case, unfortunately. Imagine the support that we have now for the Palestinian cause at a global scale. Protests everywhere, countries cutting ties with Israel and others withdrawing their ambassadors. UN representatives resign over the mass murder of the Palestinian people. And all this global support that the Palestinian cause has secured. And this is with Hamas committing atrocities. This is with Hamas killing civilians. Imagine had it not. Imagine the scale of support that the Palestinian people would have secured. And now, the more Palestinian men, women, and children are killed, the more our anger and resentment is targeted not only towards the Israeli government, but targeted also towards Hamas. For they have given the murderous Israeli government the pretext and cover for the atrocities that they are now committing in Gaza and continue to commit. I would have wished that it was untrue. I would have wished that they are mere lies spewed by the Israeli government. And even when they mentioned the place where Hamas attacks, I thought kibbutz, settlers, maybe they were the armed settlers that we saw in various videos circulating on social media where they harass and abuse the Palestinian people. Armed with guns, seizing Palestinian property, abusing men, women, as well as children, and terrorizing them. I thought perhaps these are the civilians that the Israeli governments are claiming that Hamas killed, when in reality they would be regarded as combatants. Except that that was not the case. And for that reason, there can never be anything that ties a Muslim, irrespective of the sect that they may be from, with Hamas. As for the solution to the current unfolding situation in Gaza, we proffer the following. As His Eminence, Sheikh Al-Habib presented 1 week after the events of October 7th. His Eminence said, what needs to take place now with immediate effect is the dismantling of both the State of Israel and the State of Palestine. Then deploying a UN-mandated, powerful and well-resourced peacekeeping military force with a sustained mandate to administer historic Palestine, enforcing peace and security, protecting civilians and mending a path for a single unifying state. And the objective from that is to nurture a new Arab-Jewish generation under the guardianship of the United Nations that is imbued with the profound understanding of peace. This generation, having been born and raised in an environment of tranquility and peace, will possess the necessary maturity to shape their own destiny. As the current Arab-Jewish leaders of the present generations exhibit alarming tendencies of recklessness, animosity, and a propensity for bloodshed. And absolutely coincidentally, we read on the news a few days ago that Craig Mukhaber, the former United Nations human rights official and specialist in international human rights law, policy and methodology, writing in his final letter to the High Commissioner, calling for the dismantlement of the occupying Israeli state. He writes, we must support the establishment of a single, democratic, secular state in all of historic Palestine, with equal rights for Christians, Muslim and Jews, and therefore the dismantling of the deeply racist settler colonial project and an end to apartheid across the land. And then he goes on to say, we must press for the deployment of a well-resourced and strongly mandated UN protection force with a sustained mandate to protect civilians from the river to the sea. And he goes on to urge the High Commissioner to take immediate action and not be a witness to the slaughter of the Palestinian people, saying, the current wholesale slaughter of the Palestinian people, rooted in an ethno-nationalist colonial settler ideology, in continuation of decades of their systematic persecution and purging, based entirely upon their status as Arabs, leaves no room for doubt. This is a textbook case of genocide. This is the voice of reason. In order to stop the bloodshed, in order to save civilian lives, what needs to take place immediately is the dismantlement of the Israeli state, as well as the Palestinian state, and deploying a UN-mandated, powerful, well-resourced peacekeeping force with a sustained mandate to administer Palestine for the next however many years, in order for a new generation to uprise that possesses the necessary maturity to build a government that is for both Arabs and Jews to live side by side as one community in peace. This exactly is what needs to take place. And from here, I hail and give tribute to the honorable Jewish community who came out from their homes to protest against the Israeli government calling for a ceasefire. In New York, in Liverpool, in London, and cities from around the globe, uniting as one against terrorism, uniting as one against injustice, unifying our voice for what is right and accordant. This unity here gives us hope and a beam of light in the darkness that we are in today. This solidarity between Muslim and Jew is a beaming hope for a future of peace, tranquility and stability, where both can live side by side, both against terrorism and injustice. You may ask, what about Hamas? Does a ceasefire mean that we keep Hamas in power? No, I'd respond. It is proven that Hamas must be obliterated, must be destructed, and indeed I am for that. However, not at the cost of civilian lives, not at the cost of babies, children, innocent men and women burnt with their limbs amputated, not at the cost of this tragedy and humanitarian crisis that we are in today, that we see upon the people of Gaza, but upon dismantling the Israeli state, the UN peacekeeping force would have a responsibility to crush and annihilate any resistance from either party, the former Israeli government and Hamas. Finally, we ask Allah the Exalted to have mercy upon the innocent lives that were killed. And we ask Allah to uplift the suffering from the Palestinian people and ease their difficulty. And we ask Allah the Merciful to hasten the reappearance of our Imam, to hasten the coming of the man who will fill this earth with justice after it had been filled with injustice. The awaited 12th Imam from the offspring of Muhammad, blessings be upon him and his family. For in him our hopes lie, and with him justice shall prevail.